regular viewers and listeners will have heard me going on and on and on, over and over again over the last few years about the need to be agile and also face up to change. You'll also be almost fed up with me talking about the importance of your people and their working environment. I have to tell you that those messages are not going away, as I believe they're now critical to your future. And with me today, well, a 300-mile social distance away, is the true expert on workplace and change. He's the Managing Director of Advanced Workplace Associates. Welcome, Andrew Mawson. Nice to see you, Andrew.
Nice to see you, Malcolm. Thanks for the invitation to join you today.
My pleasure. Tell me about yourself and AWA.
Well, I was one of the founding directors of AWA back in 1991, believe it or not. I spent quite a number of years in the IT industry before that. And of course, in those days, many of these ideas were a little bit, very weird, really, and the exclusive domain of the IT companies themselves in the main. But over the years, what has happened, of course, is that, eventually, and now it's taken the best part of 29 years to make it happen. We've now got a situation where people are beginning to recognize that actually mobility is a really powerful tool that we can use. So our whole business is about helping organizations rethink, if you like, what their future work and workplace and cultural arrangements might look like, and help them then to transition to them. And that's the business we've been in for, as I say, 20 odd years. And what's happened in the last sort of 7-8 weeks has sort of catapulted us forward in a way that it was almost impossible to conceive of a year ago. So yeah, it's an unpleasant trigger that we've had to do this, but it's it's certainly opened people's eyes to ways of thinking and ways of working that I think many thought was unassailable, really.
Yeah, but the great thing is I'm talking to the right man at the right time, though. Before we move on, I want to ask you something, because you've just had a personal experience with coronavirus. Tell me about it, and what was your experience and thoughts from it?
Yeah, well, we had it right at the very beginning, and so our problem was we didn't really know what to expect, and we didn't understand the severity. But it started out with the usual symptoms, dry cough and whatever, but just went on and on and on, and just felt really exhausted all the time. I mean, literally, you try to do anything physical or mental, you just would. Be asleep in minutes, kind of thing. So we had this, and then had various different symptoms. I sort of developed a rash. My kidneys started to feel like somebody sort of been kicking me around, and it just seemed to go on and on. I mean, usually with what we'll call a flu, and I think it's wrong to call this a flu actually in this way. You start to see things, a week into it, you begin to feel a little bit better and a little bit better. This just didn't work that way. I and my wife had it, she a little bit worse than I, but, breathing was affected and all this. We had her in hospital just overnight just to have some tests. Unfortunately, we was fine. But really, we didn't come out of this for about 3 weeks.
Wow.
And even then, you get everything, I feel better today, and you sort of set sail and try and do something, and you find yourself, just collapsing. So
what do you think you learned from it?
Time.
What do you think you learned from it?
Well, I'm not sure what I learned from it. So, I guess what I did learn from it. I mean, we obviously, we're a substantial business now, and the team were able to continue operating very well. And in fact, that same period, ironically, during that period, we had, during the back end of last year, we had planned to bring all our associates to the UK. And it was precisely at the moment when Boris revealed the lockdown. And of course, we paid for everything. We paid for the flights and the hotels and everything. And we had to abandon it a month before, but we took it online and we did the whole thing. We created what we call our Knowledge Festival. And it was a mixture of social things and business things and training and all sorts of which eventually ended up online. And sadly, I missed the whole thing. I'd been kind of involved in its initial origination, but I missed the whole thing. But it all worked perfectly, and the team got on with it, and business continued, and life was good, and I didn't have to worry too much about it. I was able to sort of slide back in once I started to feel a bit better. So
just
yeah,
a little,
not pleasant.
No, I understand that. Just a little supplementary about what you were saying there. Obviously, the cost of bringing the whole team to the UK, enormous.
Yeah.
And you've now done it virtual. Was it as effective virtually as it would have been face to face?
Well, you've got to understand, I mean, our whole model is about working virtual. So we use Microsoft Teams and have done for a number of years now, using, my life is a series of video calls, and people now having Zoom burnout. This is my life. I mean, I've been doing this for quite a long time. So that's, so when we bring people together, and I do recognize there is huge value in doing that, by the way, we do it for a particular purpose. We do it with a very deliberate purpose. And our deliberate purpose was to ensure that we got consistency of methods and tools and everything amongst our global population. But at the same time, is to increase the level of social cohesion between them. Surprisingly, the levels of cohesion within our business are really high, which is something people find very difficult to get their heads around. But I wanted to kind of just bring them together, drink some beer, get people to know people as people, because I think that's the way we make this work, really. We don't have any great hierarchy. We have a kind of, a very slim hierarchy in a sense. And the way it works is through a network. And so people get to know each other. People just get on and do stuff.
Excellent. Yeah.
And so bringing people together is the pinnacle, if you like. But of course, it's expensive.
Yeah.
And of course, offices are expensive. So it seems to me that if you're going to do that, bring people together, and you're going to have physical spaces in which to put them, which are going to cost you a lot of money, then they need to have a clear purpose. And that purpose, is myriad. But you need to, I think, instead of starting out with the idea that we've got a business, so we need a building, I think you start out with the premise you've got a business, and you've got people who can work wherever they want to work. Now, what do we need the building for? Okay, let's, and then we create it in such a way that it delivers the value we want it to, as opposed to being sort of the de facto start point. And that's kind of a fundamental, I think, with our approach, really, which is diametrically opposed to pretty well everybody else in the industry.
Interestingly, by the way, one CEO I was talking to on the Zoom, they'd had a virtual event had to be cancelled. So what they did, an actual event to be cancelled. So what they moved virtually. But a few days beforehand, he had delivered to everybody's house some beer and wine, so they could still do the final get together. Which I thought was good. Okay, let's get back to AWA. What's the vision of AWA, and why is what AWA does important for organizations?
Well, I mean, our vision is really to create an organization that can deliver the sort of services I described before, which are, largely at the beginning quite analytical, working out what the future could be and how it should be, and then making the transition, which is, much subtler and in many cases, multi-skilled, but very, very much about behavior, changing behavior, changing, practices from a working standpoint. So our vision really as a business is to continue to do that in an ever-changing world, but to be able to do it with organizations that are very large and global, which is what we have been able to do. Some of our, it's disappointing sometimes that I can't reveal who some of our clients are.
No, I understand.
But I can tell you that they are some of the biggest names on the planet. So our vision is to continue doing that, and really to help organizations embrace these different ways of doing things, which I think, and not necessarily just from a corporate standpoint. I mean, there's obviously a lot of corporate benefits here, reducing the amount of space you've got, reducing the amount of sort of fixed cost commitments, and so on. But there's also, there are other dimensions, work-life balance. A lot of people do want to work in these more flexible ways, and for many, this would be quite a tangible benefit. And then, of course, there's a sort of carbon dimension to this as well, which is kind of was coming to the fore, but then slipped away a little bit. But it seems to me, we do create an awful lot of carbon from buildings and also from moving people from one place to another. So there are a number of different drivers, and because each company we work with has a different personality, different set of issues and drivers, and the trick really is kind of gearing or linking all of these initiatives to the things they want to try and do strategically, in order that you get this sort of momentum for change. So that's sort of how we sort of see it. And in many ways, I think the new ways of working are really quite balanced. There's something in it for everybody.
Yes, yeah. I take the mental health and the work-life balance opportunity definitely. Look, AWA works globally. So what new forms of working and workplaces do you see happening in the near future?
Well, I mean, I think increasingly organizations can work with, as we see, without necessarily having offices. So I think that's that's going to be the preoccupation, I think, for a while. I think some chief execs are going to need to recognize that it doesn't work for every function and it doesn't work for everybody. And I think this is where there's a kind of more of a mix and match. I mean, I do think there are some subtle things going on here as well, which are actually about the shape of organizations, because we have a strong pedigree in using research to help us with our consulting work and to put forward different ways of doing things. We've just undertaken a study with the Center for Evidence-Based Management, which is an academic community in Amsterdam, to look at all the research around the world, peer-reviewed research around the subject of virtual working.
Right.
And this is a study we did with them back in 2014, but as a consequence of what's going on, they've updated it. And the UK CIPD organization has been involved in that as well. So we just received all this sort of stuff, and what comes to the fore really are things like that come under pressure when you're working in this way. Things like social cohesion. And what do you do to what you need to do to put something back in? Trust. How do you manage trust? How do you ensure people continue to trust you when they can't see you all the time?
Yes.
Perceived supervisory support. How do you create the perception that you're supporting people when they're not all physically around? So there's lots of things here, but what they all point at is a kind of dampening down of the hierarchical structure.
Right. Okay.
Because what happens when you start working with some of these new tools like Teams and Facebook Workplace and those sorts of tools, people start connecting with people, and the hierarchicalness starts to disappear. So I think what is going to happen as we go forward, and you're picking up on social cohesion, all these sorts of things, which are really critical to making an organization really work, is that I think organization models are going to shift.
Yeah.
I think we're going to start to see more kind of networked models, perhaps without the command and control battles that go on, because it's very difficult to create social cohesion when we've got 2 or 3 leaders all vying for the next big job. It just doesn't sort of set up the right conditions. So I think for me that's, I think the other thing is that a lot of organizations are going to start realizing that they might just have been in the UK or the US or whatever. They're starting to realize that actually this technology can help them to be able to recruit people from different places, to do business with clients they've never thought they could possibly do things with. I mean, I think it's just opening a lot of people's eyes, a lot of leaders' eyes, because I think what we've seen in the past is leaders have probably been, and many leaders have been the barrier to moving these things forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they'd have to end up making their own coffee, wouldn't they, if you start?
Well,
Okay.
yeah, and what would be too wrong about that?
Yeah, no, look, we're hearing, obviously, let's just follow that one through. The business leaders have looked at the working from home situation and felt they can continue with it and possibly save on expensive office space. Do you think that's a true reality? You know, technology is fine, but surely proactive teams need the interaction that comes from a physical meeting.
So I would say that it is true. I mean, my personal view, it goes back to what I was saying before. I think what we need to do, I think, is start from what I would call a zero-based start point, which is to say we don't need offices until we can prove that we do.
Excellent, yeah, good thinking.
And so, you know, and there are lots of good reasons why you might need an office. I mean, there are lots of, I mean, for instance, if you're doing something that requires a piece of equipment, or there's a regulatory requirement that means you've got to be within an enclosed environment, or you've got to do something that requires people to fuse their knowledge together very quickly in fast-moving situations, or where you genuinely have a view that in order to create real innovation, you need the serendipity of people being all in the same space. So, you know, there's lots of reasons. I mean, some people need the sociability. Some people don't have, you know, the ability to work at home, for instance. So there are lots of reasons, but I think it's important now for organisations to start thinking about this from the standpoint that if we're going to have physical space, which generates carbon and costs a load of money, let's think it through properly, and let's make sure we've got the right amount. And I do think, not only I think, I know, because of some of the work we've done, that many organisations could operate on much less space than they currently do, and with very little detriment to their overall performance.
And I'm really glad now that the stigma of working from home has gone, because I've been doing that for 25, nearly 30 years. And in the past, they would say, "Oh, you work from home, do you?"
Yes, it's all a bit weird, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Now, as you can see behind you, we have a green screen studio at home. We have the broadcast cameras and all that sort of thing, and very fast broadband. How has life changed? Eh? So, look, how are you advising organizations to implement a productive and efficient WFM program, work from home?
Well, I mean, as you can probably imagine, we've got a lot of people knocking on our door at the moment saying that what they want to do is to ensure that they don't lose the value that they've now gained from having everybody working at home, and they don't want to slip back into, when they eventually go back, which, you know, could be quite a number of months away, they don't want to go back to the old world. And what we are kind of describing is, so our job really with them is to do several things. First one is to bolster their capability to continue working in this way, which is, you know, involves quite a lot of training and helping leaders to understand what they're now dealing with, setting up new agreements between them, their colleagues, and their teams, so that there are things that are much more explicit now that were not sort of said or put in place before. Things like, you know, managing performance, bringing new people in, creating opportunities for learning, you know, just having agreements with people about when they're going to be available, when they're not going to be available, what the expectations are now, and so on. So all of those sorts of things need to be kind of rethought, and that's kind of our stage one, really consolidate what you've got. The second thing really is then to do a fairly analytical piece of work, but do it quite quickly, to work out what your end state needs to look like. What does your sort of post-COVID new normal work arrangement look like, and how much space do you need for that? What kind of technology enhancements do you need in order to create that situation? And then, you know, really, how do you evolve your culture, and working with them to sort of link all of these things together. So that's the second part. The third part is, how do you deliver it? And that then brings in a change program, which is a little different from the change programs we used to do, because of course for many people, the behavioral change has actually happened. And over a period of probably, 6 months, as people are getting more and more used to this, new habits are beginning to form, new neural connections are happening in people's brains. New models of the world are created in their consciousness. So the change program we have to do is no longer just trying to get people into that situation. It's actually bringing them back to a world which makes sense for everybody, where there is a sort of a balance, if you like, between the working away and the needs of the business, and the need for real physical space, physical get-togethers, and all of those sorts. Because I think in the end, the answer to the question, what do we need, is very specific to particular organizations. It's not something you can just sort of say, well, it's 30% of the space you used to have. I don't think it's not that straightforward.
Yeah, and must be lots of other new skills. I mean, as you know, we're doing this extensive Meet the Leader around the world. So this afternoon I'm in France and Lithuania, and the difference in people's ability to communicate. I mean, you are very lucid. You know what you're talking about. You've been doing this for a while there, but I found that a lot of CEOs are suddenly finding themselves almost adrift.
Yeah, well, I think what gets a CEO to be a CEO is often what got them to be a good director. And I think many of them, the good ones have really good communication skills. Some of the ones that are kind of more analytical in their kind of approach to the world may not do. But I think the whole business of communication and letting people know what's going on, and helping people to see where we're going, those are all very, very important, and I think often those get missed. I mean, we ourselves, for instance, the factors that I mentioned that were coming out of our research, we pay a lot of attention to those. So social cohesion is something we put a lot of store into. Managing trust is another one, but the other one is vision and goal clarity. The facts, and a lot of organizations don't understand how important that is, because I take the view that organizations are basically the aggregate energy and knowledge of the people that are in them, and the job of chief execs is really to point that energy and that knowledge at things which are going to make a societal or commercial difference. And so if we, what the research is very clear on it is that vision and goal clarity create that kind of clarity of direction, but they also release more energy. So for instance, we ourselves are going to, next month we're going through a process where we've got everybody in the business, and we're going to go through a process of recreating and rethinking our vision. Now the vision, it's not just about the vision, it's about the process through which people participate, because you obviously want those people to be involved, and all of that will be done online. So these are the sorts of things that I think people are going to have to start, leaders are going to have to start thinking about much more consciously than they probably ever did before. And I think in many ways what we're seeing from the anecdotal stuff that's coming back to us, that this time is actually helping, because leaders are now forced to do all company bulletins on Teams and things. People are seeing the fridge magnets and the
the bookshelves,
and the books and the bookshelves, and they're seeing kids running back and forwards, and wives bringing cups of tea, and it's kind of humanizing people in a way.
I agree. I didn't know you lived in such a nice house and that sort of thing. Listen, I love the way that you're making CEOs think, because that's the important bit. And I know that you're a big believer in creative thinking regarding the workplace and change. So what do you mean by this phrase?
Well, I think very often on a I guess it goes back to what I was saying before. I think, organizations are the aggregation of the brain power and the knowledge they have within them. And I think, often people are doing jobs, and they turn up and they do the same stuff over and over, again. And often leaders fail to recognize that with every one of these people who are coming to your workplace every day, there's a brain, and that brain has many years of knowledge and experience and contacts and goodness knows what in it. And I think for me the essence is to create a kind of an environment in which people feel comfortable and willing to contribute their ideas, their thoughts, their challenges, and for all that to be done in a way which is comfortable and isn't perceived as insulting.
Right,
and in many respects, I think that another job of leaders is to create that psychologically safe environment in which that can happen. And again, harking back to the hierarchical structures that we see, many of those don't really help to do that. They create division as opposed to creating the opportunity for more cohesion, teams connecting with teams, people connecting with people, and just being able to create the conditions under which that creativity can be released.
Which is helps.
I think there's a huge amount more energy in organizations, I think, than perhaps we tap into. Really.
Yeah, especially as today we've got a much more educated workforce who have got great talent that they want to unleash that potential, but often it's contained, isn't it? Yeah. Right. No, you heard in my opening piece that I've been promoting the need to foster agility within a business. I know that you've also had that thinking. I mean, you worked extensively with the Cabinet Office on Agile working. How do you help organizations deliver that agility?
Well, I think the first stage for us in all of our work is to get clear about what is the organization trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds like a remarkably simple question, but
life is like that.
But very often, actually, what we find is when we're dealing with senior leadership teams or boards, is that they're all scurrying away doing their day jobs and everything, but actually very rarely does anybody come together and say, well, what are the big challenges? What are we trying to achieve here? And then people find it, well, it's unusual to find that people have made the link between what they're trying to achieve and what is going on around the workplace and work and so on. So, our first job is really to kind of unearth that, and then is really to try and undertake a series of studies to clarify what the opportunities are for the organization in order that it can tangibly move forward. Because one of the things that stops organizations being able to take advantage of many of these ideas is a complete lack of clarity.
Yeah.
If you want to, if I want to get you to do something, I need to explain to you what it is I want you to do at a level of detail that you understand why it is that you should be doing it, why you should, why I want you to do it, how it's going to work, how we're going to make the change, and who's involved in all this stuff. And without getting that clarity, it's very difficult to get an individual, let alone a whole organization of 20 or 30,000 people, to move in a different direction.
Yeah.
So first base for that is to get the truth, a single truth about the change on the table, and then to work with the leaders and the various technical specialists to create the infrastructure, and then to bring about the new understandings, and then of course to do quite a lot of training to get people, leaders and individuals, to start to work with different practices and different understandings. One of the things that we've understood, I think, as we've gone through this, is that these sorts of projects it's not all down to the leaders. We talk about leadership. We talk a lot about workership,
right?
Which is really sort of saying to individual workers, you have to take some responsibility here for managing your trustworthiness. Your relationships with other people, the degree to which you understand what you're doing and how it links to the vision of the organization. And there's a handshake here between colleagues in the team, outside the team, and also leaders. And I think increasingly, and you made the point before, we're getting more and more people in the workplace who are better educated who are experts in their field. And it's not now about sort of corralling people into doing things and beating them up all the time to do it. It's not about that at all. This is about actually getting people to be their best, if you like, and to connect with each other and to achieve things which we need to be achieved. And a lot of the responsibility has to be put at the door of the individual. So I think getting individuals to understand that the game has changed too, and is all part of how you make this whole thing work, I think.
Surely, though, setting the right culture is important by the leaders. That the motivation is doing things because you want to.
Yes.
As in workership, yeah.
Yes, indeed.
We face not just the continuing after effects of the virus, but also a likely recession, and then there's Brexit, and as you were saying beforehand, climate change. What should CEOs be thinking about with these whammies on the way? Or happening?
I mean, a lot of CEOs will already be thinking, in fact, I know they are thinking about how they kind of downsize businesses in order to address the coming challenges. I think it's worth just keeping that, however, in balance. I mean, there are a lot of businesses that are doing pretty well in this climate. I mean, all the technology companies, the Amazons of this world, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Microsofts, they're having a ball, generally speaking, and many of their operations haven't been disrupted very much at all. It's the kind of more of the traditional economy that is suffering, tourism, travel, hospitality, all those sorts of things. So it's worth just sort of, getting balanced about the fact that this isn't hurting everybody, in fact. But for sure, if you're in one of those traditional businesses, I think you've got to be rethinking your business model. Completely. And, for sure, even if you're not in one of those, you need to be thinking deeply about how you maintain, as you go forward, how you create flexibility in everything that you do. Because I think the world is demonstrably becoming more challenging and more uncertain. And, you can be less certain about things than you probably have been able to in the past. So the ability to create an organization, space, technology, behaviors, practices, culture, bureaucracy, that can ride the waves without necessarily creating huge amounts of pain and knee-jerk pain every time something happens. I think it is a critical part of how organizations need to develop going forward.
We found a frustrating thing in my executive boardroom program I was running for various local authorities, and that was that 90% of the time businesses in boardroom situations were spending looking out of the rear window, historical figures and everything, and only and only 5 to 10% of looking forward. You are quite rightly making them look forward, aren't you?
Well, you have to. I think the world is full of examples, and we can see a few of them around us now, where, particularly in the high street, many of the things that we're seeing now, we've known for 10 years. I mean, the coming of, e-trading, the Amazon type, approach to the world and so on, that's been around for a while. And honestly, if you've been taking a big salary at the top end of a big retail business and you haven't spotted that, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a quandary, it does make me wonder what you've been paid for, if I'm really honest. But that flexibility, but that thinking has got to pervade everywhere. And I think the trouble is that, when people get to very senior levels, very often they kind of just sort of they kind of think they've made it, and and actually that's when they need to be starting to engage much more externally to continually understand what's happening in their worlds. And if they don't do that, then I think you can very easily head over a cliff without much opportunity to do anything about it.
I like your quote, or should we say questions to leaders. Are we up for the challenge? What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I think that life is easy if you just keep doing all the things you've always done, life's easy, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of, I think that there are people in life who do that. They've got to where they've got to. They've got a very comfortable lifestyle. They've survived on the things they've always known. And now we're in a different world. And you need to come out of your comfort zones, and you need to start engaging with a world that you might not have believed existed.
Yeah.
And so the question is, are you up for the challenge? The opportunities are out there if you can take whatever you're doing in your business and you can apply it in a different context. But if my sense is that in a lot of business, if you just keep trundling along doing the same things you've always done, you're going to end up in a position where your business is not going to flourish. I think that's what I
you mean,
by that.
I'm up for the challenge, Andrew. I'm up for it. Listen, tell me about your fantastic initiative, Workplace Week. I believe this year it's its 10th anniversary.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you've got to go back, as you say, you've got to go back about 11 or 12 years. I was probably one of those people that sat in front of the TV on a Friday night and watched the Children in Need thing. And one year I sat there and said, we really should do something about this, because we've got some good friends who own, have buildings, and we can organize visits and things. And we didn't do anything. The year after, we did, I don't know, I think we did 5 visits, and we invited people that we know, people like Lloyd's of London and some of the big companies, to open their doors just for an hour and a half and have a little group of people come in, and those people would, they'd get a coffee, they'd hear the story of the organization, the building, and then they'd wander around and they'd see the building and see it in an operational situation, which is like a rare thing for people to be able to do. So we charge people, £20 or something like that to go on the visit, and we put all the money into Children in Need. And then the following year we did, I think we must have done 10 of these visits, and then we did a conference, and then we did what we call fringe events. So we stole an idea from the Edinburgh Fringe, and we started letting people to have their events, and they would put some money into the pot. So over 10 years, last year I think we had about 25 visits to organizations, as various different kinds, innovative workplaces, where people have done something a bit interesting, a bit challenging. And then, more fringe events. I think we did about 10 of those last year. And then on top of that, of course, we have our dinner. And so we did it. We've been doing that. This is our 10th year. And we also did last year, and the year before, we did the same thing in New York. And this year we had a plan to do it in Paris, but which is rather gone up in smoke.
At the moment, yeah.
But we are taking the whole thing online. And so in November, we're doing Workplace Week International, which will start in the UK around about 6 o'clock in the morning, and we'll go on till about 10 at night, and we'll pick up different time zones, and we'll have different people running events. We've got people going out and doing video visits, which they're going to bring back and talk through what's going on. So we may continue with some of that into the future, actually, even when we get back to the physical. But there's something quite nice though about
lovely, getting fantastic.
So it's a lot of fun. We make a good amount of money for children's charities and some of climate change charities, and I think part of what we're about is helping people to open their eyes to different things and to different ways of looking at the world. And those visits and those events and things have a tendency to get people thinking a bit differently. So,
can people find more information at this URL?
No, we have a separate URL for Workplace. It's very simple, workplaceweek.com.
Right.
And we will be revealing very shortly our plans for November on there. And the same formula. People can sign up. They can pay a few pounds, and that all goes into the kitty for the charities.
We'll put that URL up. We'll put that URL.
Thank you. That would be great.
I think it's a brilliant initiative. I congratulate you. With your tremendous experience, I'd love if you could give some general guidance to viewers and listeners as to how to become the effective leader of tomorrow. So could you give me 3 top tips?
Well, it's tough. I mean, being the perfect leader is really tough.
Yeah.
I mean, so the first thing I think you need to do is to make sure that you are doing things which make it clear to everybody that you are approachable.
Mm.
I think you need to be doing things that you create the conditions for people to get to know each other as people more. I think
Right.
that would be the second thing. And I think the third thing is that you really need to try to encourage people to recognize that discussion and argument is actually creative, and that we
Mm.
do want people, to spark. We do want to challenge ideas. We want
Yeah.
to continually refresh our thinking in order that we can kind of, address the world ahead. And I think the role of the leader is pivotal because, it's about creating the conditions, the psychological conditions under which people feel safe. And
Yeah.
that I think is the most important thing that has come out of both our research and my experience over the years. And so many companies, people feel worried that if they reveal their true feelings about an idea or something, this is going to trample on somebody's toes. And I think that then suppresses a lot of creativity in organizations.
Yeah, that's a different way of looking at safe, Okay, so let's go the other side now. What three things should the forward-thinking business leader be aiming to avoid?
Well, I think complacency
Mm-hmm.
would be number one for me. Rigidity
Okay.
in business processes and in thinking. And I don't know what would be the third thing. I think you want to avoid, and as an individual, I think you want to avoid believing your own rhetoric as
Yeah,
far.
right.
I think remain. I mean, the word humble is used a lot, but I mean, to some degree, you don't get ahead of yourself.
Yeah,
I think is the other thing I would say.
yeah. I'd probably avoid doing nothing.
Well, that's true. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
okay. Uh, Our final question, Andrew, and it's three wishes time. If you were granted three wishes to ensure the flourishing of the future workplace, what would
Mm.
those three wishes be?
Well, the first wish would be for BT to put in broadband of a high quality anywhere. I mean, 5G
Right.
is kind of going to deliver a whole different sort of quality of experience. But there are even now. I mean, there are people in the certain parts of the country that really struggle to connect. Using the kind of tools we are using today. So I think that's number one wish. Number two wish that and I think my wish is almost being granted is that
Yeah.
leaders in particular open their minds to different ways of looking at the world and different ways of working, and recognize that people can work in lots of different places without necessarily four walls around them. And I guess the third wish is that we could start joining the dots a bit more. Particularly in relation to carbon
Mm-hmm.
and travel and efficiency and all these things, because they're all kind of linked together in a sense. And I think we need to start thinking much more seriously. I mean, we're beginning now to do within our studies. We're doing carbon assessments when we do one of these studies, because we want people to know what the impact
Yeah.
of their decisions around carbon is. So I think that would be my third wish, really, to get that joining of dots together, but also to pay a lot more attention to some of the carbon related things as well.
Yeah. And as doing so, there will be a better supplier because, procurement and people like that want to know your carbon situations. They'll be better in the community and then they'll attract more talent. Andrew Mawson, I've thoroughly enjoyed learning about Advanced Workplace and listening to you. I just think you're a stimulating, exciting business, and I hope people will pop along to this URL and have a little bit more look about what advancedworkplace.com can do for them. Thank you for
Thank
the
you.